finally,
I mentioned premise one.
yeah, he mentioned premise.
But that
he did
all
mention
hangs on premise one.
He did mention it, but I gave an argument for premise one, which Dan didn't, as far as I can see, even mention. Though he did mention premise one, and I'm grateful for that. Dennett, I'm almost done. One more thing. Dennett does propose an analogy, one which I actually like, the handheld calculator. He asked us to think about handheld calculators which track the truth, even though they are, in his sense, syntactic, in his term, syntactic engines, not semantic engines. But this seems to me an unfortunate analogy from Dennett's point of view. Calculators, of course, are designed and created by intelligent beings, namely us. They do indeed track the truth, and they do so because they've been designed to do that by us. That's just the way a theist would think of human beings. Theists would think of human beings as, for the most part at least, tracking the truth because they were created and designed to track the truth by God. If we want to put the evolutionary argument I was giving into the context of Dennett's analogy, we would suppose that calculators reproduce themselves, let's say, with occasional copy errors leading to different electronic designs. And some of these designs would be somehow adaptive with respect to their reproducing themselves. Furthermore, let's suppose these calculators produce shapes on a screen, as in fact they do. And finally, let's suppose that these machines were not planned or designed by any intelligent beings at all. What would be the probability then, on those suppositions, that these shapes on the screen are English sentences that express truths? My guess is pretty low.
All right, so let's open it up now for questions, and please direct your questions to one of the speakers. Right.
Dr. Plantinga, if I've understood what Professor Dennett is trying to say,
and try to speak as loudly as possible while asking the question.
The argument that he gave in response to your naturalistic argument is that if our cognitive faculties were unreliable, then there seems to be no possible way that we could actually make the sorts of improvements that he's referring to over the various levels of acuity, unless, of course, our cognitive faculties were systematically unreliable, like we were living in some sort of Cartesian demon world or something like that. So, if the sort of naturalistic story is true, the reason why our cognitive faculties are reliable is precisely because having reliable cognitive faculties is evolutionarily adaptive and advantageous to survival. Where's the breakdown there?
Well, I don't know if everybody could hear that question.
You can repeat it, that would be great.
Yeah, although I'm afraid I can't because I don't quite understand it.
The question is, as I understood Professor Dennett's response to your naturalistic argument, the reason why it seems unlikely, to say the least, that our cognitive faculties would be unreliable if the naturalistic story is true is because it seems highly likely that having reliable cognitive faculties would be an advantage in any sort of environment. If you had grossly unreliable cognitive faculties, then you probably aren't going to survive the pass on your genes. So the only way that you could survive in such a way is if you were sort of systematically unreliable. So for every mistake I have in a cognitive faculty, there's something else in the environment that adapts to it. So that would seem to suggest that the only way we could be so systematically deceived is if there was some sort of being, like a god, that was deliberately deceiving us and deliberately manipulating us. So,
well, I think first of all it's right to say that that the accuracy of cognitive faculties is adaptive. That is to say, consider a frog. A frog has got cognitive faculties of a certain sort. A fly goes by, the frog's tongue flicks out and the like. So there have to be some kind of indicators in that frog, that could be part of its cognitive situation, which is such that it brings it about that when the fly flicks by, the frog's tongue flicks out and captures the frog. Captures the fly. Right. This doesn't have anything to do so far with belief. Maybe the frog also has beliefs. Maybe the same physiology that produces this adaptive behavior also produces beliefs. But does it matter whether the beliefs produced are true? Seems to me it doesn't. Suppose the frog is, who knows what this frog is thinking as it does that? Maybe it's not thinking anything. What counts is the adaptivity of the neurophysiology and the behavior. That'll be connected in some way. Maybe the same neurophysiology causes beliefs of a certain kind, but it doesn't matter whether those beliefs are true. What counts for adaptivity is that neurophysiology, behavior, the way the beliefs, how they go. That really doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah, right there. You, yeah. Speak up, please.
With regard to your comment about how you can't see an interesting difference between Plantinga theism and the Superman hypothesis, I'm wondering if you think this is one. We don't know very many intelligent people who accept the Superman hypothesis, but there are scores of distinguished and intelligent philosophers in this room and other intelligent people outside the room who favor the theistic version.
I don't think that makes a whole lot of difference. There was a time when there were a whole lot of intelligent people that believed in Jupiter and Thor and Baal and so forth. I think we have a pretty good explanation of why there should be intelligent people that maintain these faiths, and so I don't think there's much. It's not to me a compelling reason to think that the Christian theism is first of all any better than Islamic theism or any better than any other variety of theism in the world, or indeed in Supermanism. Supermanism hasn't had a chance to be propounded. Who knows? Maybe if we got out there and started spending billions of dollars on Superman churches, we'd pretty soon have a majority. Hard to tell.
Yeah, a comment and a question. It's directed to Al, actually. You expressed to take a different view about what happened at Notre Dame when Dennett was there and so on. You and I were in Baylor together, and Behe was in the audience, and I was giving one of the opening addresses. I think you were chairing the session. And at that talk, I essentially put forward a number of criticisms of Behe's irreducible complexity argument. Some were purely philosophical points. A number appeared to the discussion by Kenneth Miller in Finding Darwin's God. And at the end of my talk, you mentioned that I've been talking about other things as well, had been criticizing Professor Behe fairly strongly, and you gave him the opportunity to respond at that point to my criticisms. And he declined that kind invitation, saying that he would do so in his talk the next day. I didn't mention the talk the next day, and there was no response to the criticisms at all, right? So I think that's grounds for being suspicious of the intellectual quality of Behe's approach. The question is this. In setting out the argument of the incompatibility of naturalism and evolution in the last page and a half of your handout tonight, there's no reference at all to what I take to be the crucial issue that needs to be addressed. And that is that the content of mental state, the most plausible account of the content of mental state, is one that brings causation into it. And in our 8th volume, I argued that once you bring that in, then the probability is not 0.5, the fundamental beliefs are true, it's much, much higher, okay, right? And so I think that's the crucial objection. I think many philosophers in line would agree with me that the theory of content is crucial. And so the question is, why don't you address that objection?
Well, if the question is why didn't I address the objection in this paper that I just gave, the paper is already pretty long for our circumstances here, but I'm perfectly happy to do so. Let's say, I mean, you're suggesting there's got to be some kind of causal connection between the circumstances in question and the content that gets that emerges. Maybe so. If we thought in terms of non-reductive materialism of the nomological variety, that would be what you're talking about. I mean, that would just be a case where you get causality, you get by virtue of you get a causality, a causal relationship between the neurophysiology and its adaptiveness on the one hand and the content on the other. I can't see the slightest reason though, given that there is such